Hi class, I'm back for part 2 of our discussion of wildlife documentaries. And this part I would like to discuss Nature Writes the Screenplay, which is one of my favorite chapters from the whole semester. So if you've not read it, I highly encourage you to read it now, if possible. And I want to focus on one particular subject, which is this entity that Disney created called Disney Nature. It's a film division that does just wildlife documentaries. It was created about 10 years ago. And I have a quote here on the slide that's from their website. So here, I'm just going to read it verbatim. Nature invents the most beautiful stories. Our role at Disney Nature will be to tell those stories with passion and enthusiasm to the largest public possible. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, Disney Nature is the combination of Disney and nature, and you might want to think about the implication of this idea. I think one thing they might be promoting is that they are nature. And if they are nature, then we're all inside Disney. So wrap your mind around that for a minute. It's not exactly how they describe themselves. When they say Disney Nature, what they mean is, and I'm going to quote again from their webpage, environmental stewardship can work hand in hand with protection of Disney's assets and enhanced profitability. So this is the language and logic of neoliberalism. So what they are doing is they're framing nature, their care for nature within a particular capitalistic discourse. I mean, notice how they use the word invents, which is another sort of word that we talk about, inventing industriousness, something like a machine, that you invent something. And it's, in essence, saying that nature invents things as if it were like a factory, and that what Disney is simply doing is objectively documenting that. They're also trying to promote what they use this term environmentality, a particular environmental point of view that they would like the brand to be associated with. So let's talk about that, the meaning of that. So these are all screenshots from the Disney Nature website, and you can see that they're promoting all kinds of projects of conservation where they're planting trees, they're protecting land, their habitats, things like that. I mean, these are all good things. I'm not trying to criticize that, but it's certainly something that they're trying to promote about their activities. They're educational, so here they have something about dolphins and that teachers can use in their classes. And then they have these sort of different documentaries that you can watch. Disney now has a new streaming service called Disney Plus, which is trying to compete with Netflix, and you'll be able to see all this on their streaming service. So this is sort of how they represent themselves. So the article talks a little bit about the branding strategy of Disney Nature. So first of all, you'll see that the logo is very much connected with their legacy. So they're trying to connect with their heritage brand, and or what they call a reputation capital. So what are the kind of things that we associate with Disney? I mean, I grew up with Disney in LA. I went to Disneyland. So my relationship with Disney is very strong, as I think everyone who grew up watching Disney films has a sort of a strong emotion that they relate to Disney, and Disney is trying to capitalize on that emotion and then associate it with their brand. So it's a positive association. It's stable. We always know what it is, and it's something we can trust. And it also appeals to a certain nostalgia. I think one of the things that Disney likes to promote about itself is the childhood amazement that whether it's the films or the theme parks give us, and that they are most famous for. The wonderful world we live in and the wonderful world of Disney, their lands and worlds are fantastical, magical, and they are constructed according to the company's sort of standardized template. So you see that they're very consistent across their brand, whether it's a wildlife movie, a theme park, or a film. And this nostalgia that we have appeals for our own particular desire for authenticity, and also the authority of Disney, that we trust them, that they know what they're doing, they have good product, they are professionals, they're smart, creative people, so forth. So there's a history to this. As I mentioned, in the 40s and 50s, they started making wildlife movies. I have some screenshots here and posters. Let me move this down so you can see that. Some of the marketing that they did for their earlier wildlife films. So, original True Life Adventures, that was the name of the series, were innovative, ambitious, risky, and influential. They were also sentimental, anthropomorphizing, and steeped in post-war ideologies of progress and individualism, homeland prosperity, and so-called family values. So these films always were mirroring the sort of ideals of suburban American family life at the time, 1950s primarily, the nuclear family, etc. So they were doing quite a bit of ideological work. They were ingraining certain ideological values into their films as if they were documentaries, but they were also sort of promoting a certain desired American ideal, a nostalgic view of American life. These early films, that it was part of their guidelines that there should be no trace of civilization or humans in these films. So this is ironic. So on the one hand, you have no, people, cars, any sense of civilization, yet they projected onto animal life as if they existed in a particular civilization and structure such as our own. So they attributed subjectivity to the animals. In other words, that the animals had a particular motives and desires and emotions, which was something that was different than previous wildlife documentaries before Disney. So this was an innovation that they created. So early wildlife films, let's say from the 20s and 30s, didn't attribute feelings or motivations to animals, but Disney did, because they wanted to make them more human-like. Even though they were marketed as educational, they were primarily for entertainment. So let's never lose sight of that fact. They always will try to sell themselves as being, their purpose is educational, but it's ultimately for entertainment purposes, although you could have both. Why not? So Disney Nature, the more recent iteration of how Disney makes their wildlife films, tries to market them as blockbusters to get them to go to the cinema. So now that might seem antiquated, because I don't think anyone goes to the cinema anymore. But 10 years ago, people would go to a movie, if you believe it or not, to the movie theater to see an animal documentary. And if you look at their trailers, I invite you to go on YouTube and look around. They're very much marketed with action and adventure as if they were some kind of blockbuster movies. So, as we discussed with the previous slide, yes, they could be perhaps edutainment, that they can have this dual purpose of entertainment and education. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, education doesn't have to be boring, although I'm sure these videos I'm making are not the most exciting things you've ever watched, but we try. In any case, the films, the original films at least, were tied into the relationship between films and automobiles. Remember, several weeks ago we talked about the relationship between cinema and car culture, and how the idea of driving to the movie theater was an important social activity. So in the early examples of Disney films, that they were tied to this automobile culture, which again would be kind of ironic, since these are movies about nature where there are no cars, yet you're supposed to drive to the place to see the film. Now with Disney Plus, that won't be necessary, of course. You just have to use the internet. It also tied into this last point here, nature-minded public. You know, there in the United States, there is a belief, or has been historically, a belief of the sort of the curative properties of nature, that it's good to go to the park, it's good to go out to the outdoors, and it's good to take care of our natural resources. That's why we have a really good national park system in the U.S. So I think Disney was in this participating in this ideal that these were good activities, and the films were intended to sort of promote this idea that proper resource management could also be tied to leisure and tourism. Okay, so as mentioned, the Disney strategy is always to tie the parks with the films. I mean, this branding synergy. They're not supposed to be seen separately from each other. This image here I have of Disney's Animal Kingdom is an actual theme park. It's in, I think, Orlando, adjacent to Disney World. And it's a place where you can go on safaris and see wild animals, and there's park rides. There's like some kind of Avatar ride. You can also go on YouTube and look at videos. They're kind of interesting. I encourage you to do that. So keep in mind, let's go over the first point here, that the Disney brand empire grew as a synergy between the theme park, TV, and consumerism. So you have first the films, and then you have the theme park. And the theme park, if you grew up in the U.S. at least, I don't know how it is for Italians, but it's an important part of childhood, that that you would go with your parents or your family to Disneyland or Disney World. So the films and the theme park were all mutually supportive of each other. So in the most recent iteration with Disney's Animal Kingdom, the theme park becomes a way to consume the experience of nature. So this goes back to this idea of Disney nature, that we're going to give you nature, but in Disney, the nature is surrounded by Disney. It's in the Disney reality. And this is how, as a corporation, they're going to respond to the environmental crisis. So rather than structural change, we can appreciate and enjoy and love nature, but within a consumeristic experience. That's why I think you should look at these videos that tourists have made of going to Disney's Animal Kingdom, because you go there, there's restaurants, there's things to buy, you buy the ticket. So, it's a very consumeristic experience. So, anyways, Disney Nature is part of Disney's brand strategy and cross-promotion to rework its brand associations with an environmental, sustainable business model, conservation, and environmental protection. That's because consumers are more environmentally aware, and kids care about the environment. So Disney, to survive in this environment, I mean business environment, they also have to care, and they have to participate in their stewardship of the environment. Otherwise, people will reject the brand. So I'm not trying to be cynical here, but I'm just saying that from a practical standpoint, Disney has to promote itself as an environmental brand, because environmentalism is also something that's wholesome and something that families care about. So Disney needs to sort of get on the bandwagon. But again, they're not going to promote radical structural change. You still have to drive your car to the park. You have to buy the ticket. You're consuming. They're making money. It's a for-profit system. So that raises the question is, are they greenwashing themselves? So there's this nice quote from the reading here. Low-level, short-lived consumer activities such as ticket buying reorganize environmental action through the ideology of consumer capitalism. So the way that you can exercise your care for nature, or your desire for nature, is to have a consumer experience, to buy your ticket to go to Disney. Or it doesn't have to be Disney. It could be, SeaWorld or an aquarium, some of these wildlife, or even the zoo, for example, or a biopark. So Disney's environmentality business ethic cannot allow radical messages that threaten profitability. So you're not going to see anywhere a critique of the capitalist system in the Disney nature environment. Disney, it's going to be a capitalist environment no matter what. And just to reiterate the last point, if they're not green, if they're not environmentally conscious, that's actually a threat to their business model. So it's something that they have to incorporate. Okay, we're almost done. So what are the ways that Disney Nature does ideological work? So, films are commodities to be sold within the global entertainment industrial capitalist system. This strategy of Disney Nature fits within the neoliberal framework that ties political discourse into consumerism, which transfers political concerns to the marketplace. In other words, consuming becomes a form of social activism. So instead of some kind of political activism, like changing the system, engaging in politics, voting, things like that, you can just spend some money, and that's how you solve problems. Okay, and this is all done with the thought that people's consumption choices are influenced by their desire to promote environmental causes. So I put this picture of the solar-powered Mickey Mouse silhouette. You can see this is also in Orlando, and let me move this picture here. You can see they're promoting this as, how much can this green electricity do? It can power 2 Disney theme parks. It can reduce all these emissions. So they're trying to promote themselves as being good corporate citizens. And, I don't want to downplay that they are, but at the end of the day, let's go to these final points. What happens is that you have a corporate colonization of environmentalism and the public access to nature. And this is a quote from the reading. Under a neoliberal doctrine, this corporate penetration legitimizes and indeed promotes capitalist consumerism and as an environmentally responsive activity. The alliance between Disney Nature, conservation groups, audiences, and films are sites of their marketing, consumption, and repurposing are all for the benefit for ultimately the company's bottom line. Okay, that's it for today's lecture. Thank you for sticking it out with me. Enjoy the film for this week. I look forward to talking about Marches with Penguin shortly. Bye.